It's Firearms Friday at the Wyoming State Museum in Cheyenne. I'm Evan Green, I'm the firearms historian for the museum. You know, I pay attention to the comments on these videos, and somebody said, well, you call it Firearms Friday, but you spend a lot of time talking about people and events. We want it more about guns. And if you're in that camp, you might just want to scroll on past, because in the next two episodes, I'm going to talk a lot about people and events and not so much about the firearms. So I was tasked by the collection staff to evaluate about 20 artifacts in our collection that were associated or claimed to be associated with a guy named Tom Horn. Well, who was Tom Horn? He was a range detective and Southeast Wyoming's favorite serial killer. There's a statue of him in front of the courthouse downtown, and we'll put up a picture of that. Somebody thought it was appropriate to put a Christmas wreath around the base of the statue. So who was Tom Horn? Well, he was a range detective in Wyoming. He was Southeast Wyoming's favorite serial killer. He allegedly had 17 men that he had murdered in the course of his duties. So we had in the museum's collection about 20 objects that in one way or another were alleged to be associated with Tom Horn. And the collection staff asked me to research these objects and go down that rabbit hole to see if I could either verify or debunk those claims. And it was about a full month of my time to look at all these objects and do the research associated with it. But anyway, Tom Horn was hanged in the Laramie County Jail on November 20th of 1903. He had been convicted of killing a 14-year-old boy named Willie Nickel, who was the son of a sheep rancher up in the Iron Mountain area, north and a little bit west of Cheyenne. Whether or not he was guilty of that is still debated today. But as his defense attorney said at one point, he might not have killed Willie Nickel, but he killed a lot of other people. So Horn was born in Missouri in 1860. He left home as a teenager, did the standard young man going west stuff, worked for the railroad, did some prospecting, allegedly made a couple of trips driving cattle from Texas to Kansas. His brother and father had a livery stable in Kansas. In 1880, he was in Leadville and Cripple Creek area as a prospector. He then got a job driving a stage from Santa Fe to Prescott, Arizona. And because he was familiar with the territory, he was hired to drive a herd of mules to the San Carlos Indian Reservation in Arizona. As a result of arriving at that location, he was hired by a contractor as a herder. He eventually was tapped by Chief of Apache Scouts, Al Sieber, to become a scout. He was quite skilled at tracking. One of the quotes was he could track a bumblebee in a blizzard. So he had those skills. He learned leather braiding, rawhide braiding, and horsehair work from the Apaches while he was there. When Geronimo finally was captured, surrendered for the last time in 1886, Horn was discharged from his duties, worked on a ranch for a while, tried to start his own operation, but all his stock was stolen. He showed up in Wyoming, we think probably here by May of 1892, and was hired by the Swan Land and Cattle Company as a range detective to scout around the range and look for stolen or missing cattle. And as a part of that, he became kind of an enforcer, judge, jury, and executioner for people accused of rustling. And he was particularly frustrated by an incident where he caught some people in the act of butchering a stolen beef. I think when people think rustling, they picture people driving a big herd of cattle. A lot of it was small operators who'd kill a beef now and then take the meat into town to sell it to a butcher. So we caught these people red-handed, had them arrested, and they got off scot-free. So he adopted another system, which was just to shoot them. In 1898, he volunteered to be the chief mule packer during the Spanish-American War in Cuba. He was also served under Nelson Miles in Puerto Rico in that capacity of supporting the active frontline troops with rations and ammunition and supplies. So he comes back to Wyoming, got malaria apparently, came back to Wyoming, and went to work for a guy named John Coble. And people started, alleged rustlers in Browns Park, Colorado, and in the Iron Mountain area of Wyoming, just started turning up dead, shot from ambush at long range with a rifle. So it's questionable, again, did he kill that boy? But there was a deputy U.S. Marshal named Joe LaForce who knew Tom, knew of him, and lured Horn into a room in downtown Cheyenne that was LaForce's office. He had a stenographer and a deputy sheriff concealed behind a door, and he led Horn into a conversation about his work and who he had killed and how it happened and tell me about the time you shot that boy. And Horn stepped right into it and said, it was the best shot I ever made and the dirtiest trick I ever pulled. Well, he was known to be an exaggerator. His autobiography is rife with outright lies and exaggerations. But it was enough to convict him. There was no hard evidence. So anyway, that's Tom Horn. And my task was to look at these artifacts and determine whether or not, in a museum context, they could be exhibited and accurately labeled as having some association with Tom Horn. And the group I've got before me are the ones that I decided no. Now, you may have seen these two handguns before. This is a Colt single action Army. And actually, I got the wrong bullet out here. This is a 32-20 that was shipped from the factory in 1907. Well, Horn was hanged in 1903, so we know for sure that he could not have owned or used this firearm, despite a rather elaborate chain of possession that the donor gave when she presented the gun to the museum. She also gave us 2 holster and belt sets and a presentation box. But since this revolver is so easily debunked, it casts serious doubt on whether or not the leather goods were ever belonged to Tom Horn. I say they did not. This is a Colt New Navy and Army revolver. I'm sorry, Smith & Wesson New Navy and Army revolver in .45 Russian. And this was, again, presented to the museum. A person reached out via email and said, I have this gun that belonged to Tom Horn. He gave it to an attorney named Bates in Rock Springs in exchange for legal services. Well, sure, send us the gun. And she did, with the ammunition, all in a nice box from the post office. But I could confirm nothing about that story. I could find no Bates that was ever an attorney in Rock Springs. Looked at census data, looked at newspapers.com, no Bates, right? She also said that he had been the president of the Cattlemen's Association. Well, when people say Cattlemen's Association, that's probably the Wyoming Stock Growers Association, who also never had a president named Bates. So I pretty much said, no, these guns are out. The other object that's kind of interesting is a set of handcuffs. And these are, it's kind of interesting that we've been accumulating Tom Horn associated artifacts for over 100 years. These were donated to the museum in 1920, and the donor said he believed that those handcuffs were put on Tom Horn when he was arrested on January 13, 1902 at the Inter-Ocean Hotel in Cheyenne. He was arrested by the Laramie County Sheriff, a guy named Ed Smalley. His deputy, Richard Paxton, was there as well. And Joe LaForce observed the arrest. And the comment was that he didn't resist. He joked and laughed with Ed and the deputy, Proctor, Richard Proctor was the deputy's name, laughed and joked with him and walking from the Inter-Ocean Hotel to the jail. And I ran across or found an article in the 1941 issue of the Annals of Wyoming, which is a scholarly journal published by the Wyoming Historical Society and the State Archives. And in 1941, a woman named Alice Shields interviewed the retired sheriff, Ed Smalley, who said, "He didn't resist at all. I didn't even put him in cuffs." The other time he might have been put in handcuffs was when he and another inmate managed to escape from the jail. But there's a picture of him being escorted back to the jail after he was captured following the escape, and it's very clear that he's not in handcuffs. Well, how about during the trial? Again, there's no record one way or the other, but at that time the jail was immediately adjacent to the courtroom. So I suspect he was not put in handcuffs at that time either, and he was not put in handcuffs when he eventually was hanged. His arms and legs were strapped down, but he was not in handcuffs. So, okay, we've eliminated the two revolvers and the handcuffs. The next thing we're going to look at is these items here. And there's this bridle, this quirt, and this very elaborate braided bridle with a matching quirt. So there's a guy, Ned, let me get the book. This guy, Ned Martin, wrote the book on horsehair bridles. And as a part of his research, he came to the Wyoming State Museum and looked at this bridle. And his comment was, this is a prison bridle, probably not made in Rawlins, and definitely not made by Tom Horn. An elaborate bridle like this one was a popular craft project in prisons across the West, especially in Deer Lodge, Montana, the state prison up there. They're still doing it. They're still braiding and selling horsehair bridles, belts, hat bands, watch fobs. So an elaborate bridle like this one could take 6 to 8 months or more to complete. And it was a popular craft in prisons because it could be done in a small space, and it did not require tools. All you needed was something to hold the piece you were working on while you did this elaborate work, needlepoint work or braiding. So again, this came in with this quirt and this bridle and this quirt saying these were made by Tom Horn while he was in jail in Cheyenne. Well, no. For one reason, this is made not of horsehair, but of monofilament nylon, which wasn't invented until 1935. So, no, definitely these two are not. And because the same statement was made about this piece of equipment and this quirt, this bridle and quirt, cast some pretty serious doubt on whether Tom Horn, number one, he was known for braiding horsehair and rawhide. This is very well done. It's very elaborate. It's very well done. Obviously, an incredibly skilled craftsman. Took hours and hours and hours to craft this bridle. And I think it's probably also a prison bridle because one of the features of the prison bridles are these glass rosettes. I have documentation again from the Martin book that the warden at the Montana State Penitentiary in Deer Lodge ordered these things by the gross. And look here, here's another one on this bridle. And so it makes me think that, one, Horn might not have had access to this type of material. It's 1/8 inch, commercially tanned and dyed leather lacing, and no record, of course, of whether or not he even had access to this kind of material. So I ruled this one out as well. Here's another quirt. This one's kind of interesting. This one is unique in that it is not only made with rawhide, but is wrapped with brass wire and has a brass loop at this end to attach the wrist loop. So again, I just do not think that Tom Horn had access to this kind of material. Again, it's a nice piece of work, but I concluded it was not done by Tom Horn. So staff is disappointed that I debunked their stuff, particularly this one. They thought, this is such a cool artifact, this set of manacles. I looked up till my eyes crossed at images of antique handcuffs, vintage handcuffs, could find nothing that matched. Did a reverse image search and found a pair in the collection of the museum at Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. And their store, they had no real provenance either, other than alleged that it was used on a whaling ship to handcuff unruly sailors. So again, a lot of the stuff that is alleged to have been made by or used by or owned by Tom Horn is based on a single oral or written statement by a donor. And there's stuff all over the country that's alleged to be made or owned by Tom Horn. So again, there are instances where there's better provenance. And in the next episode here, section 2, version 2, we'll talk about some of those that I think legitimately are associated with Tom Horn. So anyway, thanks for watching. Oh, if you have questions or want to know more about Tom Horn, this is an excellent book. This is Larry D. Ball, Tom Horn in Life and Legend. Ball's a legitimate historian. I used his work and his references a lot when I was doing research. This is also a good one. It's by John Davis, a retired Wyoming attorney, and it's specifically about the trial from his perspective as an attorney. There's 2 others that are quite good. One by Jay Monahan and one by Dean Krakel. These are earlier books, but also very, very well done and legitimate and good information. And again, be advised that out there on the internet and in articles and wherever you look, there's a lot of misinformation about Horn. The legend has just spread and been corrupted in many ways. So, okay, thanks for watching.